If everyone could please move on in, we're going to start in 2 minutes, please. So if everyone in the back could please come forward and take your seats, we'll get started with our next session at this Ocean Innovators platform. Please, everyone, come to the front. I see you in the back there. I know it's hard. Come on. Take a seat. You'll get back in the sun later. All right, welcome back, everyone, to the second half of today's Ocean Innovators platform. Welcome to those of you who are just joining us now this afternoon. For those of us who are just joining us, just know that you can get a better look at the program and the speakers just by flashing the QR code on the back of your badges. Welcome to all of you joining us from wherever you are around the world as well. Don't forget, you too can be part of this event by sending in your questions via the Q&A button on your screens. Remember, wherever you are today, whether it's at home or here with us in Monaco, you can always tweet about everything we're talking about today with the hashtag MOW2022. Just another reminder, we have a very exciting keynote speech coming up at the end of the day today. That will be with the founder and chairman of the Solar Impulse Foundation, Bertrand Piccard, in the presence of His Serene Highness, Prince Albert II of Monaco. That's coming up at the end of the day today. Now, we talked a lot about innovation this morning. There are some truly incredible ideas out there, but the number of ocean ventures is growing. Investment, it seems, in all of those ventures seems to not be keeping up. So we're going to hear now from some of the leading ocean investors out there today to see how you all can get more involved in ocean investment. This session is co-convened by Barclays. It'll be moderated by the head of Sustainable and Impact Investing at Barclays, Damien Payatakis. Damien, would you please join me on stage now with your panelists, Jean Castellini, Jonas Skattem-Svedgarden, April Crow, and Mark Schroep. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you for the welcome, and on behalf of Barclays Private Bank, it is both a pleasure and an honor to be able to support Monaco Ocean Week for the second year. Our panel today is unique in its focus. We shift from the natural excitement of the entrepreneurs and the innovations that they're developing to hopefully generate some excitement for you within the audience to think about investing in ocean ventures. It's that often quoted statistic that SDG 14 is the least invested of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. But we're not here today to lament or to observe or to admire the problem or even to tell why we should be investing in the oceans. But really, our panel's ambition is to focus on how you as individuals, families, family offices, and foundations can be investing for financial returns and for positive outcomes for the oceans. With that, let me introduce the panel. First, Minister Castellini is the Minister of Finance and Economy for the Principality of Monaco, having been appointed at the end of 2012. Prior to this, he was the Chief Executive of J. Safra Bank in Monaco. In his current role, the minister has championed efforts to embed more sustainable finance throughout the Principality. Recently, this has ranged from a green fund to support innovation for sustainable and green recovery as part of the National Recovery Plan post the pandemic. 2 years ago, he launched the Monaco Sustainable Finance Initiative to align the Principality's unique roles with His Serene Highness's commitment to sustainable development. And finally, and most relevantly, taking the decision very recently to invest in a basket of ocean-related ventures as part of the National Fund. Next, Mark is the Director of Schmidt Marine Technology Partners, which is a program within the family foundation of former Google CEO Eric Schmidt. Schmidt Marine provides venture philanthropy funding and support to develop technologies and ventures addressing ocean problems around fisheries, plastics, nutrient pollution, habitat health, and ocean research, and has funded more than 60 efforts. Prior to his current role in past consulting, Mark built his career around oceans both as a scientist, studying deep ocean carbon cycling and algal blooms, and as a journalist across a litany of major publications and assignments ranging from seafloor by submersible to remote islands and through the eye of a hurricane by plane. We'll have to save that for a different panel. April joins us as the VP of External Affairs and Investor Relations from Circulate Capital, an investment management firm she helped launch 4 years ago. Now in its second fund, Circulate Capital is incubating and financing companies that prevent the flow of plastic waste into the world's oceans and advancing the circular economy with a particular focus on Southeast Asia. Previously, she provided leadership for the Coca-Cola Company's environmental sustainability and governance platform. And additionally, April has developed and managed programs and collaborative efforts in partnership with government, industry, and NGOs, such as the founding of Ocean Conservatory's Trash for Seas Alliance, and as a founding member of the American Institute for Packaging and the Environment. And finally, Jonas is the CEO of Catapult Ocean and the Chief Investment Officer of Catapult, a global impact investment firm and accelerator based out of Norway. Prior to this, he spent 15 years in the global asset management and investments, having launched one of the best performing and the only eco-labeled hedge fund in Norway in 2015. In 2019, Catapult Ocean was founded with a focus on food, energy, ocean health, transport, and data. And across 4 ocean funds, it has made 42 investments in ocean companies, making it one of the world's most active investors in early-stage ocean impact space. As you can see, we have an extensive range of ocean investment experience. So let's dive into the 3 topics of today's panel. How does a panel source, select, and support ocean investments? My first question, just a quick round for everyone. Start with you, Jonas. In one sentence, why should we, as individuals or family or asset owners, be interested not only to support or donate to oceans, but to invest in ocean ventures?
Yeah, I think I'm going to flip that question to the audience and the investors in the audience. And how would you like to invest for oceans and climate impact and back some of the next unicorn companies out there with a low correlation to the capital markets and receive over 40% net IRR?
Sounds like a good starting point for a financial return argument. April, what's your view?
Yes, I'm going to borrow from a comment that was made in the opening by Olivier this morning around the economic growth opportunity in this space. We have heard a lot about the challenges. We're well aware of the challenges facing our oceans. And when you have challenges to that magnitude, you have solutions. We've heard from some great entrepreneurs, great businesses that are looking to not only demonstrate impact, environmental and social impact, but also show significant economic returns.
Yeah, absolutely. The idea, sadly, that the biggest problems and challenges we have are also the biggest market opportunities. Mark.
So I would look at the starting point for motivation. So I would say, as we're all well aware, there's a great deal of work that needs to be done in the ocean to solve problems here. Some of that work can't really be done effectively at the scales needed and in the time frames needed using conventional philanthropy. But businesses and markets can operate on those scales. So that's our motivation.
Yeah, an interesting one. And Minister.
I would simply say, because it is our duty, and for us in Monaco, it is a very natural thing to do. It is in our DNA. Wherever you look, wherever you set your eyes in Monaco, you see the Mediterranean. I was born here, I grew up here, I went to school on the Rock, and I spent many late afternoons, I was not the only one, watching Cousteau movies. Voila, it's an obvious thing for us to do. That's not only something very dear to the heart of our princes, with, you know, the tribute to Prince Albert I in this very special year, the centenary of his passing away, but also obviously we'll get back to that, the involvement of His Serene Highness Prince Albert II and his foundation. So we're just following in their footsteps and implementing their vision then and now again.
Fantastic. I think voila is probably the best succinct response we could have as to why we should be doing it. But let's get actually into the three topics. April, let me start with you. Right, we've got 5 different thematic panels today: carbon, food, coastal from this morning, and later regenerative and plastic. Not a difficult question, I think, for you as to which one is the most interesting. But why did Circulate Capital focus on plastics specifically?
Yes, I think I'm most excited about the opportunity to hear from the plastics panel this afternoon. But there's so many different challenges. I could talk to any of those. But at Circulate Capital, we started really based on science and data. I think that's another theme that I've heard today, is how do we connect really strong data and scientific information to direct investment to really have impact. As you heard, my background, I spent 20 years at Coca-Cola leading a lot of the environmental work related to packaging and recycling. And as you can imagine, Coca-Cola is and continues to be at the face of this issue. So I use this term loosely, but I became the ocean expert for the company, attending my first World Ocean Summit 10 years ago, where the issue of marine debris and plastics was barely on the agenda. Fast forward today, my neighbors know about the issue. Before, they would look at me like, what are you talking about? But now there's a real recognition, and that's because of the science and data, and that's what led us to our work at Circulate Capital. There was a study that came out in 2015 in Science that started to talk about the leaking countries and where the greatest flow of plastics were into the ocean, and it pointed to South and Southeast Asia. Following that study in 2017, there was one that looked at how do we put solutions in place that can stop the flow. Yes, we need innovation and we need to look at game-changing solutions, but how do we start now? And that's what led us. We had a number of corporations. Circulate Capital is also unique that the Circulate Capital Ocean Fund is a $100 million fund that is solely funded by large corporations from Coca-Cola and Pepsi, so 2 competitors sitting together, Chanel, Unilever, and others that have come together to put money into this fund to focus on an area that we know if we can stop the flow there, we can reduce and develop the infrastructure that can continue to reduce this issue overall.
Fantastic. Now, Minister, through the basket, which we'll come back to, your team made a decision not to start with focusing on one specific sector, but we've also talked about plastics being of interest and why that might resonate with you personally. And I'm curious about that, but also to what extent do you think, going back to your investment days, do you think sector focus for investors should be driven by personal interest or macro and market trends that we've heard about as well?
Well, let's start with the personal reason why plastic and plastic pollution is something very dear to my heart. I was talking about myself as a child. This is what children today do in Monaco in some of their classes, whether in French or in English sometimes, together with their French teacher and their biology teacher. They look at the damages that plastic pollution contributes to the death of fish, turtles, and other animals. They are keenly interested. This is another example of what I was amazed at working with my son on some of those issues. Maybe for those of you who are keenly involved with this topic, it is not new. To me, it was a discovery of how bad the situation is. They learn about recycling. They learn about cleaning beaches. They learn about what the Oceanographic Museum here in Monaco is doing to help nurture injured turtles. Again, when I said it's in our DNA, beyond the investor aspect of things that I'll go back to, it is something we have come to live with, and our new generations in Monaco, today as students, but tomorrow as investors, are already very well aware of the issues that we professionals will be dealing with later this afternoon.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah, absolutely. That connection with the next generation in the more natural and intuitive way that they see connection between environmental and economic and social issues is quite profound. Jonas, as we said, Catapult Ocean has verticals around food, energy, transport, health, and data. You know, if you're talking to investors, at present, where do you see the fastest growing sectors that you're interested in?
I think we're spending a lot of time with our investors being family offices, foundations, corporate ventures, pension funds. A lot of time around those topics that they know. Investors would like to invest in things that are familiar with them. So whether or not it's ocean energy or new future foodways or transportation and shipping in this industry, that's where we see the most activity and their first interest. So I think to activate investors into this blue economy and innovation space, we need to find those intersections. And we do have some very specific investors chasing plastics, chasing reef restoration and marine protected areas. But we at Catapult, we're investing quite broadly, as you know, to activate the whole industry.
And Mark, would you agree with that? Are those the sectors that are interesting to Marine Schmidt? But also, is that where you want to be funding?
Well, we're certainly interested in those sectors, but we take a little bit of a different approach because we've always tried to focus as much as possible on the gaps among the things that I think we all agree are important. Because it's easier for us to fund than for a traditional investor because we don't have to have those returns to feed into our model. So we try to find the gaps. We've always done that. We're still, figuring things out. But for us, more recently, it's been more of a process of trying to ask the question of what are the greatest needs of, I would say the more acute ocean issues, and of those, where does our model kind of fit the best? So for us, we've ended up focusing, we still do all those things, that broad range that you talked about, but we have focused in a little more on nutrient pollution, dealing with these issues that are driving so many problems in the coastal waters and fisheries, sustainable fisheries.
Okay, so almost as leading indicators to what Jonas and April's and other might be looking at later on, which is really interesting to think about. I know we can go on, but let's move on, just given time, to the second topic around selection, sort of picking what does good ocean ventures look like. Jonas, let me come back to you. So 42 ocean investments, actually 100 in Catapult, including 4 impact unicorns, as it were. And given that number that is made it into the portfolio, I can only imagine how many have been diligenced sort of through that process. Let's talk about your selection process for a moment. If you were to think about what are the top 3 criteria that greenlight an investment for you, what would those be?
It's team, and team.
Okay.
With the wrap of course, the financial returns and the coachability to the founders and the team.
Let me push you, though, because what makes that different from traditional venture? What is unique, do you think, about Oceans relative to other venture that you're either doing in Catapult as such?
Just to take 2 steps back, we're impact investors, so we would like to see we would like to see the founders and team have their minds into it, but also the heart. We believe in that's when you get the beautiful founders team and the next unicorns of this this decade. So we're always chasing, and when I'm saying team, it's that we will always find our answers with those teams. That's that's the ones driving this innovation and the change we need to see.
And how much is it technical knowledge relative to business knowledge, relative to passion? Where are you weighting on those? Or even, as we talked about last night, diversity within the team?
We think that we need to see them to be coachable. So the business knowledge, we have a lot of modules that we're working on together with our founders on that. They need to be technical. They need to understand the specific solutions that they're trying to solve, obviously. So that's if I were to choose, that's the most important.
Okay. April, let me come to you. How does picking ventures in a single sector make it both easier and more challenging for Circulate?
Yeah, it's similar that we're looking at this from a catalytic capital perspective. So while our first fund has these corporate partners who maybe have a little bit more patience around the return and tolerance around that, our premise is around solving this problem of ocean plastic. And the million-dollar question, or in this case, the multi-billion-dollar question of how do you get that infrastructure in place, has to bring in institutional investors and investors of much larger sizes than the fund that we have. So that's one of the first lenses that we use, is around looking at what the potential opportunity is, both from an economic perspective to show the return, so the type of team in place, the history, their business plan, but then also clearly combining it with impact. What impact does this potential solution have on the issue overall? And how can we make sure that it's something that we can scale and move to other parts of the world?
Okay. And Mark, does that sound familiar to you? I mean, as you said, you're picking innovations at an earlier stage. So there's less to be developed, there's less traction probably, or commercial model. How do you think about what has potential to succeed when you have less track record and less visibility of the venture and what it's been doing?
Yeah. It is different, but it's a version of the same thing. So we have learned sometimes the hard way that it is the people. I know that's obvious enough, but there were times where we kind of lost sight of that. So the idea, obviously, the potential impact and benefits of the idea, and coachability. Openness to working with people. It's not going to be me, but the people that we're going to try to connect you with. And I think a realistic understanding of the challenges and sort of realistic goals, that reflect that understanding, because you don't always find that, especially in the earliest stages. And the other things, I mean, obviously it depends on at what stage they are, but obviously we like to see a business model that's workable if they're at that stage. But those things, people can be helped with those things. You can't fix the people.
Interesting. We're going to come back maybe to the challenges or failures. I think often lessons learned from those postmortems. Very interesting. But Minister, let me come to you. The other panel members obviously selecting individual organizations and companies. You and the team made a decision to invest via an investment manager. Can you share a little bit of the thought process there and why that was attractive for the ministry?
But before we come to that, I would say that Monaco is not just geographically blessed, we're also financially blessed, because we're one of the few countries in the world with no debt and no structural budget deficit. And as we manage our public finances well, we come up with budget surpluses, which we invest in a reserve fund in sustainable ways. And so we do not invest ourselves. We're too few people to do that. We select investment professionals around the world. We've started investing in sustainable ESG-like strategies 20 years ago. So we were among the pioneers. And we've come even closer to the topic we're addressing today by indeed selecting one specific investment manager for Blue Ocean initiative, and all sectors being represented: energy, fishing, aquaculture, shipping, and we mentioned also plastics. Looking at high growth, high impact companies within the climate change and the sustainable blue economies. And we're focusing on the blue ocean economy investments as they are the ones which most complement Monaco's Blue Ocean initiative. So not only do we do good, but I think we do well by selecting qualified professionals whom we trust and whom we give our surplus to manage, if I may say so.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in terms of that, thinking about sort of the stages, right? And there's a couple of public market ocean economy type funds, but this is in the private markets as well, so earlier stage, which is quite innovative as well for a national fund to be putting money into as well. Can you explain a little bit why you thought that was valuable and worthwhile to do in terms of that earlier stage company idea?
Also because we think it's excellent diversification. So going back to my very, very early years in the industry, I used to work for a Berkeley-based investment management financial software company. And that today is still something very dear to my mind, where we have to figure out, back of those days when only risk and return were the two dimensions we were dealing with, we're now dealing with sustainability and impact as additional dimensions. I read with much interest a quote from your chief impact officer at Circulate Capital. In my days, CIO meant chief investment officer. Now it's good to see that it also means chief impact officer. And that lady said, we know that inclusive investing is smart investing. And so if we can be at the same time smart, looking for investment solutions which provide high double-digit returns like the ones you referred to, portfolio diversification, and at the same time, it benefits the planet and it's aligned with the objectives of His Serene Highness for the preservation of the ocean, I think we're doing the right thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think what we're hearing is it's building a case both from an investment perspective, diversification. We see more and more families going into private markets, using that to avoid some of the volatility that we're obviously seeing in the markets today, as well as the benefits and the directness of the investments that they're making, and the additionality that also generates. I think for many individuals, being able to actually see the companies grow is something that's a real joy to be able to say they put capital into those. And very clearly, from the Notion perspective, you see that substantially because of the underfunding. Let's move on just to the last topic in that idea of support. And Mark, in one of the prep conversations, one statement I noted, amongst others, you said many good quality ocean ventures die that shouldn't. That being said, you also had the contrapositive, which is many bad ocean ventures stay alive longer than they should. But we'll park that one for the moment. Let's focus on the good ones that should be able to continue. Why do you think that don't? Why do you think that's the case? And beyond capital, what else do you think is really needed to support the growth of ocean ventures?
Well, I think in a sense you could trace it to capital. So the starting point, I would say, and this was kind of our starting premise when the program was founded, and I think it's proven out, because there are so few resources, at least traditionally have been so few resources in the oceans, that leads to a different sort of work. So especially if you're talking about like oceanographers who laughingly but accurately say, they deal with baling wire and duct tape. That's the life they've led, so they haven't been able to oftentimes get the funding they need. So a lot of the people that we work with come with that mindset. But also, and they shouldn't be business experts, but they don't have that business expertise. And so they'll have a great idea, and sometimes you have, again, we deal with a range of folks, but I'm kind of thinking about the academics, and those you have a great idea, and they don't have any interest in pursuing it beyond that. They're okay with publishing a paper and creating a thing and hoping that somebody else picks it up and runs with it, and there's nothing wrong with that, but oftentimes no one runs with it. And then the other side that I guess we deal with more often is that you have researchers with a great idea and passion, but they don't know how to, they want to run with it, but they don't know how to run with it. And so that's where we try to come in. And like I say, I can't personally develop a business model for someone, but we try to put them in touch, get them the resources that they need and the help that they need to do that. But I think that's what we think about as far as why they die, I think.
And it's actually really interesting, both April, you and Jonas, in terms of some of the other innovations that you guys are putting around what it is, the traditional investing, right? So Jonas, the accelerator program that you run, April, the community that you referred to, right? The corporates, both as investors and partners. So let me ask you, so how does that support entrepreneurs to be successful? And actually probably what impact does it have on return profile of the investment?
Yeah, I think the partnership piece is key. So we aren't only putting money into these the portfolio, and neither are the corporate partners that we have. We are leveraging their global supply chain knowledge and their technical knowledge to partner with the portfolio companies to understand what it will take to get them to scale. So as an example, if we're looking at a plastic recycling technology, being able to tap into an R&D person and one of the corporations who might ultimately use that in their packaging material helps give them insights into that space. But it also means just basic technical knowledge and business skills with all of these. I think that's the challenge that we found is many companies that we've invested in India and Indonesia already have sound business models, but they just really lack the ability to take it to the next level. And when they've gone to traditional banks, it's not a space that's been invested in before. So we're trying to prove that case with them while we continue to help them through these unique partnership opportunities.
Interesting. And Jonas, yeah, from an accelerator, what do you see? So if an investor was going to go out and not have the benefit of what you do, what are some of the frequent issues that you see with the Ocean Ventures and the accelerator programs?
Yeah. I can just, as a backdrop, our accelerator program, we're impatient by nature. So what we would like to do is to increase the chances of our solutions and our MSDs to make it. If they make it, we will make it. So what we're doing is plugging on our vast network within the ocean economies, whether or not it's corporates, it's potential pilot customers, it's funding options, it's a research institute and other investors. We all need to help them together. So that's a huge part of our accelerator program, where we do have building blocks and tailor-made solutions for each company to see them grow. That's what, in the end, what we would like to deliver to our investors and ourselves.
And do you see similarities, again, back to where Ocean Ventures are distinctive from others in the accelerator program or others that you've seen?
Absolutely. I've never seen a community that pull working together that much as we do in the ocean industries. We wouldn't find the same mentality on land and in other businesses I've been to.
I'll just add to that. I think as he was speaking, just the ecosystem that is being built through these communities. I know we have our portfolio companies all connected, and they are facing some of the same challenges. And in many cases, one solution may be feeding the value chain of another. So helping them kind of work together and build that knowledge and the financial pieces that will then ultimately make them and us successful with the returns.
Yeah, very interesting. We're about to start audience Q&A, so please get ready with some questions. But one final question for you, Minister. So the ocean investment which you've committed is a clear and, as I said, laudable signal from the government to support what is still a nascent investment sector and theme, and clearly the support of the Principality and the Foundation. How else would you like to see more investment in this space, and what role do you see government playing in that wider sense of support?
I think that indeed we can play a role on the non-financial support side beyond what we do on the financial side. And that was very interesting to hear your consensus around the fact that this ecosystem is quite different from on land or inland. That's also what we feel when we mean that we can play a role which goes far beyond our 2 square kilometers and the financing resources we can deploy. There again, the actions of our princes mean we have credibility. Prince Albert II shows commitment. He has a vision. And it is about soft power at the end of the day. And of course, you mentioned also we had this green fund as part of our economy relaunch plan, which went really successful. We also have a blue fund, but it's more about digital economy, but you can also blend ocean research and digital. So at the end of the day, I think it's very much a function of what we stand for, what Monaco as a country stands for, the place to meet. Where else in the world would you be in a yacht club which looks like a ship, looking at 12-year-olds taking a sailing lesson? I said voila in my introduction, I'll say voila again.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah, no, I think very clearly you have probably a number of entrepreneurs that are thinking about relocating either pre or post exit to Monaco after the last few days.
I think it has to be post-exit.
Post-exit.
If you look at the
maybe pre as
real
well.
estate.
Maybe pre as well. Let me go to the floor to see what questions we have from the audience around for our panelists.
Hi, Richard Bellaby from the Norwegian Institute for Water Research. I have a comment and question about the climate narrative and its relationship to risk of investment. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to lead one of Europe's largest climate downscaling projects, and we're working with stakeholders with blue solutions, everything from combined wind farms and oysters in the North Sea to lobster fishery off Chile, working with the Great Barrier Reef. And it's what I've heard is looking for sustainable solutions under the present state. Not really, and looking at the climate feedback, the carbon uptake of that particular solution. What's missing is the discussion around the risk of that investment and the timelines of that investment. It's fine if you have a 3 or 5 year investment, but lobster fishing due to deoxygenation of Peru is not a good investment. Kelp farming in southern Norway is not a good investment because of rapid ocean warming and heat waves. How do you evaluate risk, and where do you get your information from? Because the IPCC scenarios are too broad. So where's your information coming from? It's probably aimed at you.
I guess I'm looking at you a little bit on that one, given some of the conversations.
Thanks, Richard. Maybe I will take it up a notch and not being at the southern part of Norway on that specific note. And our approach to risk. We do have financial risk, technology risk, and we have our impact risk at Catapult. The financial risk is a blended, or it's a mix. It's a big equation of government funding, other types of funding than just ours. So that's it's good to see other types of funding stepping up to the plate. So that part is much more de-risked now than it was 5 years ago. So it's a good environment for investing with regards to the financial risk. Technology risk, more and more things are put into the waters. We have a cost of technology going down. We know how to do more stuff than we did, once again, 5-10 years ago. Again, it's a good time for technology in the waters as well. And lastly, we do have the impact risk. And now with new regulations that I think everybody in the room feeling of the investors, it's what we've been dreaming of in the financial markets, that we will now look at the environmental risk and not only the societal and government or governance risk. Governance being the hot potato before, and only 10 years ago, we didn't even dream about assessing the environmental risks. For us, we're doing our own assessment based on our mentors and partners and that data and our own impact assessments.
Let me try to keep our going with a few hands. Let's try to get maybe 2 questions at the same time.
Yes. Good afternoon. First of all, thank you very much for this Thank you very much for this exchange. Derek Quest, Stock Alpera from the Analytics Impact Platform and president of the Swiss branch of the Foundation of Prince Albert. I wanted to rebound actually on risk and some other discussion this morning regarding data and scientific verified data. So my question is about actually new types of financial instruments or risk mitigating instruments linked to flows of data coming into business models. That first question. And second question, a little bit maybe more technical, but to Jonas, is the concept of impact tokenization, meaning new types of financially driven, technology driven financial instruments. Do you see an opportunity to complement actually your arsenal? Thank you.
Mark, do you want to pick up on the data question? Because that was one area that you guys have looked at as well, specifically. Jonas.
Right. So, I mean, it's an area that we're very interested in. We don't fund, research per se, but we are very interested in sensing that's needed to drive other types of investments, other types of businesses. And, the models there are difficult. I mean, it's not the same thing, but the idea of where you get the profits there, and it's different for each case. But if it's needed that much, we can find other ways to fund it. I'm not sure if I'm really answering your question other than to say it is essential, and there are a lot of cases that we're talking about where we don't have the data we need, and we are going to need some creative models to produce those data. But also, I would just tack on processing data well too, because it's sexy to say get data, get data, get data, but less so to have the back-end processing that allows it to be applied.
Do you want to quickly pick up?
Yeah, very quick. I would love to nerd down in impact instruments and financial instruments, but I think for this room and to move investors into impact investments, just the first hurdle. It's that's what we need to use most of our time and effort, making those impact investments and those venture investments in the blended portfolio much larger than they are now. And yeah, that's my worry, that we're not moving too fast with that.
It's an interesting one. I mean, for what we see and for what I've seen, there is in the broader impact space, a number of different mechanisms and impact ratchets and sort of quasi-revenue-based sort of funding models that are emerging as well. But ultimately, I think a little bit, sometimes it's the getting capital to the entrepreneurs. I think sometimes it's easy to say, oh, well, we don't have the data, we need more data to make decisions. If I look at the leading innovators, the families and those that were at the earliest stage of this impact investing movement, they were not worried about whether or not they had all the data. They were worried about, does the business intuitively make sense as it grows and scales? Not to say, again, at some point that the data is going to be hugely valuable to decide what to invest into. But I think given the timelines that we've all been hearing, it's not going to be a question that we've got 5 years to collect the data to make a decision about which investment we should make, and then make it, and then hopefully it'll scale up. I think to some extent we're at the stage where we need to continue to be bold, and in fact more bold around that. Sorry, took a moderator's prerogative. We've got time for a couple more questions, I think. Oh. Please.
So regarding what you said about the fact that investors need to be a little bit more bold, so we have here a very impressive group of investors that invest a lot in blue economy, Schmidt Marine, which is known, of course, Catapult and Circulate Capital, and of course the minister as well. Did any of your companies ever invest in the past in wave energy, or were looking to invest in wave energy, or it's too scary?
We've been certainly looking at that. We're invested into tidal, offshore wind,
wave.
Floating solar.
Wave energy.
Invested yet into wave technologies.
Why? The question is like why? Because the technologies are getting very mature, like companies like EcoWave Power has power stations working and connected to the grid.
I would love to tell,
yeah?
It's a case-by-case basis.
No, of course. But like my general question was like why there is such a big fear from the sector? Like we're fully funded, it's important to say we're publicly traded, but like why there's such a big fear from wave energy, from all the funds that I've ever seen?
I can only answer for us and say that as part of our narrowing, we had to say that we were going to focus on dealing with the issues in the ocean. Of course, energy and addressing energy issues affects the oceans. So we focus on the ocean, not on the things people do with it. We don't even like people. If we could just... So we do. So we focus on the ocean. So that was it for us. The other thing for us is, and of course we've grown over time, but particularly when we were starting, they were much more complicated, much more expensive projects, and they were a little out of our price range for shopping.
Do you want to pick up?
I'll add more from a thematic perspective. We, just because of the space that we're operating in, we haven't looked at that. But I would say when we are looking at investments right now, we are splitting between incremental improvements and building upon success of technologies that are known. But we've realized to really make a difference, it's got to be transformational technologies as well. So we started a separate fund to really look at those game changers that can have a significant impact. So I think that's part of the space, is finding those investors who are willing to go beyond what is known today.
Thank you.
And I think that's a more general issue, right? And if I'm observing, and quite frankly, when we would be talking to our families and family offices, very clearly everyone has a connection to the ocean. We talked about that. But the idea of thinking about it as an investment, I was laughing, I can't remember who it was that said, if we went and talked about kelp or seaweed, the first question will be, oh, that's the sushi. That I'm expecting after we have this, that I'll have a conversation with the family, we'll start talking about ocean and seaweed as a potential opportunity, and that will be the first thing that people think. I think it's still an awareness and an education process around this being investable, whereas other sectors in climate have had more of the visibility as such. Do we have time for one final question, I think?
Yeah, I love that, grabbing the bull by the horns. Love the audacity. So I have a question for April. Obviously, you work in the packaging sector. We are Flexi, and we develop a bio-based packaging made from seaweed. So obviously, when I see you on stage, I can't wait for what you're going to say. And so the question is, what is, based on your experience, the biggest barrier to implementing plastic packaging solutions in a large industry sector? I know that you mentioned Coca-Cola with the fund that you have, as well with Pepsi, but usually when we talk to those bigger, the big guys, basically, they need us to be at a technology level that is much more advanced and have already a pilot ready. So we are seeing a lack of early funding, which I thank you, Mark, for taking care of investing in early stage companies. But other than that, what are the biggest barriers to entering once you have a product? How do you scale up?
Yeah, I think that's what you just said at the end is the challenge, is the scale. Because when you're working with global companies who are looking at their global supply chains, it's being able to understand how you can drop that in so it doesn't require a lot of additional capital to make it work in their system. But as I mentioned, that's why we really started to look a lot. So I'm happy to talk offline a little bit more about materials and next generation delivery systems and really moving more into that space to bring those types of technologies to bear.
But before you get to the scale-up stage, you already need the funding, and this is where it tends to be tough for us.
Definitely. Sorry, I'm gonna hold just for a timing perspective because I don't want to cause later panels. Definitely one for the coffee break, and I think a common question for many entrepreneurs. But we've also heard stories of how they have moved beyond. So definitely one to learn from peers as well. Let me go around one final question, one final thought for the audience from each of you. And the Minister, let me start with you first. In terms of what's the best lesson or advice that you have for investors who are interested in ocean opportunities? What has come to mind through this process for you?
Well, maybe two quick answers. The first one, going back to wave technology, we in government, I think, have become experts at wave management. The wave that I may refer to as the health-related issue that we've been dealing for 2 years has not fully disappeared yet. Now we're facing a geopolitical wave. Let's hope we will have time to rest a little bit in between waves because they tend to get closer and stronger. The other answer goes back also to my years at UC Berkeley when I try to escape once in a while from a very boring financial statistics class to attend a fantastic music class. And there I discovered a work by a British composer named Ralph Vaughan Williams called A Sea Symphony. Voila again. The lyrics are by Walt Whitman. And so they go at the very end, sail forth, steer for the deep waters only, reckless, O soul, exploring, for we are bound where mariner has not yet dared to go. I think that's what we're here for, innovation, new technologies, challenging times ahead, but as you said, a very strong team spirit within your industry that we're happy to share and support at government level.
Fantastic.
So thank you.
Mark, go around.
So if I was just going to say one thing, I would say if we're going to invest for impact, then we need to avoid focusing on only those things that traditional investors would invest in. So if you're going to, and there's all kinds of caveats to this, and there are realities and everything that different people, but if you have that backing somehow that allows you to be patient, let's invest in the things and focus more on the impact than the traditional side would be able to do.
Fantastic. April, piece of advice or lesson learned for investing in ocean opportunities?
I think connecting some of these issues together, I think that's happening today, but particularly in the climate space, to remember circular economy and recycling. There's a lot of environmental benefit and also economic potential with some of the legislation and globally corporate interest in this topic right now.
Fantastic.
I think I always say that it's never been better to invest in ocean innovations. And I hope I'm going to say that the next 5 years and the next 5 years and the next 5 years. But I really think so. I think we have immense opportunities investing into the oceans. We've only seen the beginning of what we're experienced with the blue economy. And what's I can't think of any other fun thing to do of investing alongside your passions and what you can relate to. So I think as our founders, invest with the head and the heart. And now we're seeing financial risk going down, technology risk going down, corporates waiting to adapt the solutions we've seen today. And we as consumers as well. So I think I'm really looking forward to the launch of this and hope to see this will accelerate into the future.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jonah. And then thank you to all the panelists for sharing your knowledge and moreover for joining us here. I'm sure that you'll have a number of personal conversations to follow up on. To conclude, let me just take a moment to say that, at least from my perspective, the urgent challenges that we face around the world are not going to be solved by government or philanthropy alone. In terms of being equipped to solve the problems. And to be clear, that is not to say that those are not necessary, but if we're going to confront the interconnected and the complex problems that we face around ocean issues, and the billions of investment that are needed, we need more innovative models, more innovation around finance, and also a commitment from those who are in the position and have the energy and enthusiasm to do it, and that is those of you in the room today. Across the day, we've heard about these solutions, and I certainly hope that our panel has given you some insight and encouraged you to think about them as investing as well as supporting and funding to develop and scale these ocean innovators. So thank you very much for the time today. Thank you.
Damien, thank you so much. Oops, I'll just pop up while you're coming down. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our panelists today for that discussion on investing in the blue economy. Now, earlier today, we spoke about how ocean farming can be good business. We're now going to really examine how it can be profitable, but also regenerate the health of the ocean and the planet. For this panel, which is convened by the Climate Tech, would you please welcome our panelist, Brent Smith, who should be joining us online. Also with us, can you please come on stage, Caroline Slotweg. Where are you, Caroline? There she is. Karen Schofield-Seal, Thibault Montfort-Michaud, and our moderator today, Rini Wyndham. Welcome. Yeah, that's lovely.
Hello, everybody. Bonjour, tout le monde. It's been exhilarating to hear so many very constructive ideas for the future today, and we're going to add about 4 more because we're going to concentrate on seaweed in this session, both the farming, the regenerative farming of seaweed and its processing. And earlier on this morning, we heard Brian talking about the fact that we keep talking about sustainability, but we don't take it a stage further and talk about regeneration and renovation. So this is it for you, Brian. We're going to talk more about regeneration this time. I'm Renee Wyndham, former BBC broadcaster and your moderator for this session, based in Saint Raphael, up the road, and in the UK. As you can hear, ocean farming can be a promising business proposition, and also it's good for the planet, so it's a win-win situation. We have a terrific panel with us. You've heard their names. Now you're going to hear a bit more about them. Later you'll hear even more. Bren Smith, hello. I can see you, Bren. Are you happy?
Yeah, thank you.
Great to see you. You've got your characteristic hat on. That really fits. Bren's with us virtually from the USA, and he's the co-founder of Greenwave, who regeneratively farm seaweed. Caroline Slotweg, I've been practicing the name here in Dutch, is co-founder of Kelp Blue, and you're also a regenerative seaweed farmer, as well as marketing and rapid upscaling, which we just mentioned in the last session. Hello, Caroline. Karen Schofield-Seal is co-founder and CEO of Oceanium, who create food as well as packaging from seaweed. Hi, Karen. And I have to say, probably our youngest entrepreneur today, although I could be wrong, 22-year-old Thibaut Montfort-Michaud, CEO and co-founder of Flexi. Bonjour, Thibaut. Right, and you're local as well, from Monaco, so we can be very proud. So most importantly, we look forward to your questions. Think of them now, because we only have a little gap, and we want to get as many in as possible at the end after you've heard from our speakers. Live, of course. So let's turn first to you, Bren. I'll look over there, because anybody online can see the 2 faces. And Bren, you're joining us. You know the sea from top to bottom, because you were a fisherman. And for decades in Newfoundland in Canada, and then you decided that instead of exploiting the ocean, you would actually give something back. Very impressive. So you became a kelp farmer. Bren also co-founded his non-profit organization, Greenwave, in 2014. You could say he's a poacher turned gamekeeper. And he also won the Climate Change Award from the Prince Albert Foundation last November. Some of you might remember that. And he's affectionately known as the father of regenerative ocean farming. So, Bren, tell me about your vision, and also what other fishermen thought of you when you went the other way and went into putting something back into the ocean.
Absolutely, it's a complete honor to be here, and I'm always makes me nervous and humbled to be up on a stage with folks that are so knowledgeable. So I grew up in Newfoundland, Canada, next to a fisherman's co-op, and dropped out of high school when I was 14 to fish. And my heroes were fishermen. And the question now is, for me, what's the hero job that I want to do going forward? Those of us that are in the fishing community. Fishermen have their self-directed lives. They succeed and fail on their own terms. They have the pride of feeding the country. It's like a soul-filling job. And I think one of the things about climate solutions is it's really important to tap into that blue-collar innovation and really create an army of folks that wake up every morning going out onto the water trying to address this issue. So not just on land with financing and policy, but really getting their feet wet. And so, I didn't want to become a kelp farmer. It was very embarrassing to start with, because I'm a hunter, right? But I was forced into kelp farming with the collapse of the cod stocks in Newfoundland, which meant that, listen, I'm not going to die on my boat successfully one day if we don't protect the planet. Like, I thought environmentalism was about birds and bears and conservation zones. It's actually a kitchen table issue. There are going to be no jobs on a dead planet. So when I started the sort of petri dish, and I've been farming the same patch of water for 20 years now, I was getting laughed off the docks. But as other fishermen have faced what I fish, which is declining stocks, that shifts views very quickly. And it turns out something like kelp, which is a seasonal crop, is shoulder season. It's off season for many fishermen. And so now we have, we've got a waiting list of 8,000 people at Greenwave for our programming just in the US for training, and many of those are fishermen. So I think ecology has actually shifted culture. But what's important is that the climate transition is really about a cultural shift as well as an economic shift.
When you're doing the training, I don't know how you get through 8,000 because it's going to take you some time, Bren, but what kind of mistakes you said you made quite a few mistakes in the beginning. So what would you pass on to teach the people you're training?
Yeah, I mean, I was a terrible farmer. I ran a death camp. I started with oysters and I just killed millions of oysters because, like, cultivation is such a different thing. Like, I couldn't go to the same bars. I'd get beat up if I talked about seaweed, and then I had to hang out drinking tea with arugula farmers because it's just like such a different, like, your nervous system has to hit. Over time, I grew a blue thumb and really fell in love with the pride of, like, lifting a wall of plants from underneath the water and really living on that 20 acres. But not only did I not have a blue thumb, like, design really matters. I see a lot of seaweed designs coming in, and those of us in the water just really kind of shake our heads because you need to be a willow, not an oak. My farm kept on getting destroyed or torn down in ice and shifting like a mile and a half away when the storms came in. And what I learned was, I don't want like huge buoys that sort of stand strong, but I just want rope and simple floats that bend with the hurricanes and the weather, and then pop back up. Again, that willow versus an oak. And we just really learned that underwater design and principles of sort of flexibility and low overhead really matter. I mean, we were able to increase yields by a factor of 5 last year per acre with only a 10% increase in costs. But you really got to keep your eye on not over-designing underwater.
On April the 19th, you're going to be launching your regenerative hub, which includes farm design, tools, curriculums, and so on, as part of the training. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so, we were forced to really think about scale because, like, as an industry, I think, and as a climate movement, we're really stuck between big is necessary and small is beautiful. And small is beautiful doesn't have the impact, and I actually think big as necessary is not going to get the social license and loses this incredible opportunity in the era of climate change to keep economic equality and building justice and reformatting the economy with climate solutions together. And the answer for us is really network production, replication, not a 1,000-acre farm, but 110-acre farms. What you keep your eye on is how much carbon, how much nitrogen, how much biomass do you pull out of the water, and then figure out what kind of economy we need to build around that. It might be less efficient, but it really might build up a future that we really believe in and distributed where the benefits go to many people. So Greenwave's Hub is really an open source system where we have farm design tools you can put in your bottom type, you can put in your acreage, things like that. It spits out 2 farm designs that are normalized, standardized, and we know that work, an interactive budget, interactive gear list. Then we've got a community where farmers can learn from themselves. We've got paid farmer mentors on that support some of the best farmers in the country. Then we have the Kelp Climate Fund, which pays farmers who are mature, that are growing 5,000 pounds or more, for the climate benefits of their kelp directly. And they give us data in return. And then we have the seaweed source, which is a forward contracting mechanism. We forward contracted 250,000 pounds of kelp this year through forward contracting, so farmers know how much gear to put in. So that ecosystem, and distributed with a principle of distributed sort of reef models of production is our direction for scale. And I really do think the industry needs to question itself Like, what does scale look like? And make sure we're not doing 20th century concepts of scale. Like, can't we be more creative, interesting? Can't we create something more beautiful and powerful that includes more people than vertically integrated companies where only a few benefit at the top? And this isn't ideological. This is really about, like, if you want your kids to survive this coming disaster, you need armies and armies of people invested and feeling part of this climate solution, like World War II, like a World War II footing, and people need agency and participation to do that.
Well, talking about the future, in case, I mean, kelp is pretty hardy, but if the kelp crop fails, or if market prices go down for kelp in a big way, how do you stop the temptation to not only go for the farmed variety, but to start tearing up crops willy-nilly by people who are less skilled and less knowledgeable than you are?
Yeah, and this keeps me up at night. Like, and we're already facing, you know, we have enough volume, you know, like about 1.5 million pounds coming off the East Coast alone here, where processors and value-added companies are very sort of price conscious, and we need to get the unit economics right? So everybody benefits and everybody succeeds. Policy is going to play a huge, huge role here. And that's what's sort of exciting, is because it's a new industry, we can actually craft and write the legislation. We did that here in my state, did something called the Seaweed Jobs Bill, and at the time I was the only job in the seaweed industry, but we were able to set these guardrails in the industry pretty quickly and effectively. So I think policy is really important. The other thing is, you know, I run a diversified farm, so it's year-round. If one crop fails, you have other crops to rely on. So I grow oysters, clams, mussels, things like that. And so if my kelp fails, then I move into my mussel season to keep that individual farmer alive. I mean, that's the other thing about natural solutions, right? This, like, Mother Nature doesn't work on monoculture and attacks it, right? So if you've got thousands and thousands of hectares of just kelp, Mother Nature is not going to participate. Like, natural solutions are about diversity and biodiversity. So we want to farm with that integrated model. Now, there are challenges with that for sure, but we really need to listen to the ocean, ask the ocean, what does it make sense to grow and how do we grow it, and then shape our blue economy around that.
If there isn't enough kelp to feed 8 billion people, which in the end would be your biggest vision, what else will you be looking at then?